Shalom Aleichem, our journey through Shas continues with Mishnah Yomi in Bava Batra, chapter 5, Mishnah Het, the 8th Mishnah and the 9th Mishnah today. Hamocher yain v'shemen l'chavero. Someone is selling wine or oil to his buddy. V'hukru, and it became more expensive. O shehuzlu, or it became much less expensive. Now, they might want to retract and go back on the deal if the price has changed and now either the buyer or seller could get a much better deal somewhere else. So could they retract? Well, it depends. If the midah, the measuring utensil, the barrel or the jug is not full yet, then the wine still belongs to the mocher, the seller, and either party can retract. But once the container is full, lilokeach, it already belongs to the buyer. The sale is done. The deal is done. And now, if there's an issue of ona, overcharging or undercharging, we discussed that in Bava Metzia. Here, that's not the issue. They just want to get a better deal somewhere else. Now, as you mentioned yesterday, if they're using the kalim, the jugs, the containers of the buyer, then as long as they're not in the public street, it should automatically belong to the buyer every drop that goes in. If they're using the vessels of the seller, then it should still belong to the seller, even if it's full, as long as the buyer hasn't done an actual meshicha or other kinyan on it. So the Gemara explains we're dealing with the case where it's the kalim of a third party, a different guy, like an agent or somebody in the shuk who has a measuring cup, so it's not the kli, it's not a vessel belonging to either the borrower or the seller. And the Mishnah brings a related case to that concept, im haya sorcer b'nehim. If there's a sorcer, like a broker or a middleman or somebody who's facilitating the transaction, he's between the buyer and the seller, and he's the one handling the kli, using the measuring device and filling up the barrels. Nishbra chabit, and the barrel broke. Nishbra l'sarcer, it broke for the middleman, for the broker, meaning he's going to have to bear the loss and pay for it. Now, we're dealing with a case where he was a little bit negligent. Maybe he put the barrel down on a shaky place when he was filling it up, and that's why it broke. And the Bartnura brings from the Gemara that the chiddush here, the innovation here, is that he's not considered to be an agent working for the seller. He's an independent third party who's working for himself. V'chayev l'hatif shalosh tipin, and something else about pouring out liquids, you have to wait for 3 drops. When you're pouring your container into the buyer's container, you not only wait for the pouring to stop, you wait for 3 more drops to come out as well. And if your wine or your oil is very thick and viscous, that might take a little while. And then after that, hirkina umitza, if he tilted the container back down and it was mitza, means like it juiced, like their little puddle formed. Harehu shel mocher. That actually belongs to the seller, not the buyer. The idea here is the buyer doesn't have to get every last drop. You pour it into his kli, into his container, and then you keep tilting it until 3 drops come out. And then when you put the original container back down, there's still some liquid remaining, but everyone understands, you can't wait until 27 or 38 drops come out. So 3 drops is an acceptable amount, and whatever tiny amount of residue is left in the bottom of the barrel still belongs to the seller. But a shopkeeper who's doing a lot of volume, he doesn't have to wait for the 3 drops to come out for every customer. He has a lot of customers. It's going to cause a lot of tircha, a lot of delay. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Erev Shabbat im chashecha pater. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, he normally has to do 3 drops, but if it's already Friday afternoon, it's getting close to Shabbat, then everyone understands, everyone's in a rush to fill up their wine and their oil and everything they need for Shabbat. Everyone understands that the buyers are foregoing those last 3 drops in order to expedite the getting ready for Shabbat process. On to Mishnah 9, a sholeach et beno etzel chanvoni. A parent sends his little son, a young child, to the shopkeeper to buy something. A pundion biado. With the pundion, it's a 2 iser coin in his hand. He also has an empty jug in his hand. Umadod lo beiser shemen. And the storekeeper gave him 1 iser worth of oil. That's what his vessel will hold. But not to lo at iser. They gave him the other iser coin as change because he came with a pundion that's worth 2 isaron. Shover at tzlochit, on the way home, he broke the jug, bumped into the lamppost. Ibid at the iser, and the coin fell down the gutter. Henvoni chayev, the storekeeper has to pay for the oil and the jug and the lost coin. In the Gemara, they explain this is dealing with a very young child who you normally wouldn't send expensive items or money with. And the idea was that the father's real intention here was not to send the oil and the money back with the kid. It was that the shopkeeper should send his delivery guy to actually make the delivery of the items. In the Gemara, they also explain, the Barnura notes here, that the shopkeeper is only liable to pay for the jug if he actually used the jug for his own purposes, like to measure out for a different customer, not for the little boy. But if he never touched the jug, then the father is going to bear the loss and the kid's going to get in trouble. But the Mishnah adds, Rabbi Yehuda Poter. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, the shopkeeper doesn't pay anything. Shalmanat ken shlocho. It was on condition that the child bring back the merchandise and the change. That's why the parent sent him. His idea here is, logically, the parents trusted the kid enough with the pundion coin, so they would trust him with the same value of oil and the change on the return trip. And Rabbi Yehuda would hold that when the shopkeeper borrowed the jug that the little boy was holding, he was a shoel. He was borrowing it. He wasn't a ganav. He wasn't trying to steal it. So maybe he shouldn't have done that without permission of the parents, but it doesn't make him liable for any mishaps that later happened with the jug. Finally, the Mishnah adds, Modim Chacham Rabbi Akiva, the sages would agree to Rabbi Akiva, Bizman shetzlochit biyad tinuk, when the jug never left the hands of the child. Hatinuk moded and vani the teichu, and the shopkeeper is just pouring his own oil into the jug that the little boy's holding. The shopkeeper never touches it. Chanvani putter. That, of course, the shopkeeper would be putter on that jug if the boy breaks it on the way home. And this Mishnah reminds you of a concept we saw back in Kedushin and Yevamot, that 2,000 years ago, even 1,000 years ago, children, young people, had a lot more life experience. Many times, maybe it's a machloket in this Mishnah, but children used to have a lot more practical life experience than young adults and college students have nowadays. So it's something important to keep in mind when we're looking at children doing acquisitions and transactions and marriages in Mishnaic times, in the Gemara times, is they were often much more mature and capable and understanding of the consequences of their actions than some adults are to this day. Yashar kochachem, sei gesund.